TCU should reconsider and keep the Iron Skillet game going.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. I've been covering TCU athletics for the past 12 seasons. Thanks for joining us today. We're brought to you by FanDuel. You can live bet on NFL games at FanDuel.com or on the FanDuel app. I'll tell you about that later on in the show. We'll talk about TCU baseball getting off to a 3-0 start. They finish off their opening series against San Diego this afternoon at 2 p.m. Also, both men's and women's basketball get a victory. Men won on Saturday, women won on Sunday. So we'll talk about that in segment 2. But we start today with an idea that this is not a new topic when it comes to discussing TCU athletics and TCU football, but this is the last year of the Iron Skillet. I mean, I think the game will eventually be played again, but as far as the consecutive series, the rivalry game that we've come to know, it's coming to an end at A&G Carter this fall. And for years, there's been a debate about this. For a long time, the debate was really just TCU fans saying, hey, we need to end this game. We need to end this charade. TCU-SMU is a historic rivalry. We get it, the regional aspect of it, two DFW teams. For a long time, both teams were relevant and very good. Of course, SMU has the death penalty. They come back, and for 2 decades plus, TCU just dominated this rivalry. Honestly, until Sonny Dykes showed up in Dallas at SMU, it was very one-sided. Every once in a while, SMU would jump up and get a victory, but for the most part, it was all TCU all the time. And while I thought it was a good measuring stick for TCU from the standpoint of it was a game that SMU really got up for. So TCU had to be motivated. They had to be focused to win. At the same time, there wasn't really anything for TCU to gain from it. If they won the game, they took care of business and did what they were supposed to do. If they lost, then it looked really bad. It was a G5 team beating a Power 5 team once TCU made the movement to the Big 12. And yes, for a significant period of time, it did make sense to say, you know what? We're going to go elsewhere. We're going to end this thing. But Mike Buddy has recently been named TCU athletic director. And I'm at the point now where I've reconsidered this stance. Because when the Skillet was announced that it was ending, there was a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth from the national media, from the regional media. And it all centered around TCU should keep this game going for the sake of college football. That this was another great historic rivalry that was coming to an end because of greed and consumerism and realignment and all those different things that have killed many other rivalries or suspended them temporarily. But I always sort of thought that was fake outrage. Because, as many people pointed out when those discussions were happening, this was not a game that people were putting in the national spotlight. It wasn't like each and every year folks would gather around the TV and watch TCU and SMU outside of TCU and SMU fans. College Game Day wasn't spending a segment talking about this historic rivalry. There weren't many writers that were pinning pieces about the history of this game and what it means for the Metroplex and all those things. Now, it got some juice back once Sonny Dykes arrived and SMU upset TCU a couple times at home, and there was some off-the-field drama as well. And suddenly there was a new feel to it. And then this past offseason, SMU makes a move to the ACC, and we all kind of scoffed at that, and I was very vocal in saying that SMU just bought their way into this conference and they were going to fall flat on their face. Well, that didn't happen. There's really good vibes for a intense rivalry here. Sonny, they hate Sonny. SMU fans hate Sonny Dykes. Understandably, he left. He went to TCU, right? And those first 2 years that he was head coach of the Frogs, TCU found a way to win. And then there was this huge buildup, and then SMU couldn't handle it. But then this past year, they jump up and they embarrass TCU in Dallas. And I realize that from a TCU athletic standpoint, This is simply getting an extra home game. It's a chance to have another home game, and they're tired of having to go to SMU every other year. And while I understand that, and for a long time, in some ways, TCU was doing SMU a favor by doing that, because you don't see Power 5 teams travel down to G5 schools very often. And TCU was committed to that agreement that they had made. Well, that's not the case now. And as much as we like to laugh at the environment there, I have heard from people that SMU is making a big-time investment in their facilities, and they're doing what they can to make it a much better experience for home fans and visiting fans alike. And it's now a Power 4 or Power 5 matchup each and every year. And when this was announced, there was a subset of TCU fans that were excited because the thought was, awesome, well, now we can go schedule some big-time games. Because TCU's had this strategy for years where they have to schedule a Power 4 opponent. The Big 12 encourages them to do that. And so they've done that. But when was the last big-time non-conference game they had? I mean, it had to be Ohio State at Jerry World, right? They played LSU at Cowboy Stadium. They played Ohio State at Jerry World. And since then, they've scheduled Power 4 opponents. But all due respect to these teams, it's been Purdue. It's been Stanford, Colorado, most recently North Carolina. And honestly, they've really lucked out because North Carolina is getting Bill Belichick this year, so that's a huge story, and it's going to put them in a national spotlight. Deion's debut was a massive story, and so it put them in the national spotlight. But if that wasn't the case, then those would just be run-of-the-mill Week 1 games. And you look at the schedule through 2030, the non-conference teams they're playing. Stanford again, Duke twice, Sam Houston, Arkansas State, Texas State, Southeast Louisiana, Purdue in 2030, North Carolina again in 2026. These are Power 4 opponents, but they're not big names. And Mike Buddy could prove me wrong. Maybe he's going to go out there and schedule some big-time games. I would love to see that. But my guess is TCU's looking for an extra home game, which means in most years they're probably going to play a G5 school. And maybe every once in a while you convince somebody to come down to Fort Worth, or you go play somebody on the road. But I'm skeptical that this means they're going to go get a big-time opponent. So I think they need to reconsider their stance here. And I don't believe they need to do it out of nostalgia or out of the goodness of their heart. But there's an opportunity to create a big-time rivalry. And if SMU can stay consistent and if TCU can continue to improve, then it could become a headliner type of game. And TCU needs those games. The Big 12 needs games like that, just to be honest about it. They need those games to put a national spotlight on their programs. TCU needs Baylor to get right again, because that needs to be a game that people circle on their calendar. And while for a long time I agreed with most TCU fans that were like, this is silly, we got to end this thing, I think the dynamics have changed. And you don't keep this game, again, you don't keep this game because it's the right thing to do and because you care about the history of college football, or because you want to appease the national media and have people pat you on the back and say, oh, good, they're keeping this going. It's because I think it can benefit you. That's why they wanted to cancel it, and I think that's why they should reconsider. When we come back, TCU hoops, men and women both get victories this weekend. We'll talk about that next year on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. FanDuel, it's All-Star Weekend. NBA Saturday night, Mac McClung again, NBA dunk champion. Had the All-Star game on Sunday, new format. Once again, still trying to revamp that and figure that out. You can make live bets on NBA games through the FanDuel app or at FanDuel.com. You can even do same-game parlays if you want. That's right now at FanDuel.com or on the FanDuel app. And new FanDuel customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. You make one $5 bet, you win that bet, you get $150 in bonus bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. The Cardiac Frogs, TCU men's basketball, they go on the road to Tempe, and they take down Arizona State 74-70. Noah Reynolds with a big three late in that ball game with under a minute to go to give TCU a 70-67 lead. I said this on social media after that ball game, and I mentioned this before in the podcast. It really is amazing for a team they're now 7-7 in Big 12 play. They're over 500 in the overall record. But for the most part, this has been a very up and down team. They've been a 500 team for the majority of the year. They've hit a lot of big shots. Vashawn Ouellette hit the miracle three. I mean, not totally a miracle, but it was a pretty wild sequence of events to take down Oklahoma State earlier in the week. Noah Reynolds had game winners against BYU and Kansas State. Both games very similar. Clock winding down, not quite a buzzer beater, but a last possession type of victory. Brendan Wenzel hits a three against Baylor on the road to break the tie and give the Frogs a victory in that game in Waco. And then playing Arizona State, unfortunately, what's been a very familiar script for this team. You get out to a 10 or 12-point lead. It looks like they're going to roll in the second half. All of a sudden, some sloppy possessions, turnovers, a scoring drought. Arizona State gets cooking. They hit a three to tie the ball game, and now you look up and you're in a dogfight. And on that final possession, it was very disjointed. They had Noah Reynolds out at the top of the key. They run a screen for him. They can't get anything there. They do a little dribble handoff action with Vashawn Ouellette. Eventually, Reynolds gets the ball back, and he sort of ball fakes and hesitates and leans into a shot. And it hits the back of the rim, but it rolls in. Arizona State turns the ball over. Jace Posey hits a free throw, and the Frogs end up getting the victory, 74-70. I think actually Jace Posey bricked a couple free throws. Arizona State didn't score on the next possession. Then Vashawn Ouellette sealed it with a couple free throws to end it. But Frogs win. And even though Jace came up short on those free throws at the end of the ball game, the real story of this game, Jace Posey, I felt silly in a couple of recap shows this year where I've been like, man, Jace Posey gave them great minutes tonight. And then I'll look and he only had 4 points or 6 points. But the Baylor game was where I first really noticed it. He had a couple of big offensive rebounds, some scores in that ball game where he was aggressively taking the ball to the hoop and was able to finish or draw a foul. Against Arizona State, we saw a little bit of everything. Taking the ball to the hoop, mid-range game, but where he's thriving right now is putting the ball on the deck and getting to the rim. He's incredibly athletic. And he had a sequence in that ball game Saturday where he had a bucket. He came down. Arizona State player was trying to get in the lane. He helped off his defender, stole the ball, took it coast to coast, finished again with a bucket. His final line in this one, I think he ended up with 20 points. Yeah, 20 points off the bench in 30 minutes, 6 of 8 from the field, 8 of 10 from the free throw line. Team overall, 74% from the line. Arizona State's not a very good defensive team, and you saw that in the first half as TCU almost scored 40 points. Now, things slowed up for them a little bit in the second half, but they got out another victory. And slowly it feels like the light is starting to come on for some of these guys. Posey's definitely in that group. David Punch has had a really good start to the year, kind of came back down to earth, but now is once again asserting himself. Micah Robinson, I like what they've seen from him. It still feels like the tournament is kind of a pipe dream. I was talking with Jacob Langford, who is a frequent listener to the show, over the weekend, and I think it was Nick from Killer Frogs, Sports Illustrated site, that put out something this week or weekend basically saying nobody who has ever finished 500 or better in the Big 12 has missed the NCAA tournament. And so TCU has that opportunity. They play Texas Tech on Tuesday night at home, and that's a big one. But TCU definitely has an opportunity to finish 10-10 in conference play. If they could get to 11-9 or 12-8, that'd be even better. And while it feels like the non-conference losses have kind of sunk them, I know the Big 12 is not as strong as it has been in the past because they've added some teams, and it's not the 10-team round robin it used to be. And so the days of going 9-9 or 8-10 and being a lock are over. But even with that being said, in this league, if you finish with 11 wins and you win a couple games in the Big 12 tournament, I think it's going to be really hard to keep you out. Now, ideally, you could end up 12-8. And then I think at that point, you're having a real discussion. I don't know if they can do that, but I feel better about where they are now than where they were a month ago. And I think the big key now is, can you find a way to keep Alette, Punch, Posey? You'll get Frankie Collins coming back next year, Micah Robinson, Ernest Uday. If you have that core group returning next season, then I think you have the potential to be a pretty salty team. And it does seem like, I mean, to Jamie's credit, his teams tend to grow and develop as the year goes on. And I feel like this team is doing something similar. Now, they haven't, their ceiling hasn't risen to a place where I think they're going to be in the postseason yet, but they've improved. And, you know, they kind of find a way. And then they'll turn around and get blown out. But they've found a way in some of these tight games to pull out some victories. They got a few more opportunities against Texas Tech and Baylor, to pick up some quality wins, along with, you know, stacking up some wins against UCF, West Virginia, Colorado. That's going to be the key here as they start to hit the stretch of the season. TCU women, they take down Arizona 85-73. This was a close game. It was tied at one point in the third quarter. TCU had a 7-point lead at halftime, but Arizona stayed in there. Now, Skylar Jones for Arizona is a baller. She had 30 points, 9 of 11 from the field. As far as TCU goes, a really good night from Sedona Prince. 22 points, 12 rebounds. Madison Connor had 18, and she had a couple big threes, like 2 separate possessions where Arizona had cut the lead to 3 in the fourth quarter, and she hit a three-pointer to push it to 6. Aaliyah Roberson is a difference maker. She had 18 tonight. She was 4 of 6 from 3. She's a post player that can step out and hit jump shots, and I think she really helps the spacing with Prince on the floor because of her ability to play on the perimeter. The turning point of this ball game, TCU was up by 5 with about 7 minutes left, and Madison Connor hit Sedona Prince on a good pass. Prince had her defender sealed off. She was able to catch the ball, finish. Then Arizona comes down the floor. Donovan Hunter steals an entry pass. I don't know what happened. I don't know if the Arizona defenders heard a whistle, but everybody kind of stopped. Hunter did not. She put her head down, took the ball coast to coast, finished with a lay-in. They got another stop, and then Roberson hit a 3 on the other end of the floor, and that pushed their lead out to 11. And that was a huge moment in this ball game. Haley Van Lith is struggling right now. And I don't know all the reasons why that's happening. She had 11 points. She was 4 of 11 from the field. It's evident. Arizona did things a little bit differently. They didn't full court press much, but they were trapping off these screens. They're blitzing these ball screens. I mean, they're sending 2 defenders at the guards. Ever since that K-State game, everybody has tried to do some variation of, we're going to make life tough on these guards by throwing a lot of different people at them. And it's varied in success because of the personnel, but I would say each team that's done it has had some level of success. And so Mark Campbell is going to have to find a way to continue to evolve and get them where they need to be. But I'll say this. The 2 losses they've had in conference play against Oklahoma State and Kansas State, both of them were frustrating because they felt like winnable ball games. But they've done a fantastic job. They have not dropped like an inexplicable game. I had trouble with that word. Meaning like there hasn't been a game on the road where they've gotten upset against a team that shouldn't beat them. They've handled their business really well for the most part, and that's to be commended. That's what's kept them tied for Big 12 championship race right now. When we come back, TCU baseball, they've started the season 3-0. We'll talk about some things we like and some things we don't next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. So there is nothing sillier than trying to predict trends or make big proclamations. This is my job. I'm supposed to come with takes and opinions. I understand that. But there's really nothing sillier in sports than to try to make big-time predictions and proclamations after 1 weekend of baseball. And technically, TCU hasn't even completed their first series. They play San Diego at the end of a 4-game set this afternoon, but they're 3-0 to start the year after taking down San Diego today 13-5. They had a 5-4 win in extra innings on Friday. Carson Bowen with an inside-the-park home run. That was cool to see. And then they pulled away on Saturday. I believe they won that game 7-1. But Jack Arthur had a pinch hit grand slam in the 9th to really push that thing out of reach. But it was a close game up until that. But I'm going to just do like some things I liked and some things I didn't from the first weekend of baseball so far. Things I liked. Some real power in this lineup, at least early on in the season. Isaac Cadena, the transfer from Ohio State, catcher/first baseman, he went yard twice. He went yard on Friday and on Sunday afternoon. The Friday home run was a big one because TCU was down 4-0. That cut the lead in half, gave them some confidence, which was good to see. But he's got some power from the left side of the batter's box and has done a nice job defensively. Didn't look super comfortable at first base, but did a nice job catching. He came over with Bill Mosiello from Ohio State. TCU just didn't have anybody who could really launch the ball at the ballpark last year, and he's shown that ability through his first couple at bats this year. Noah Franco, big-time freshman, number 1 freshman in the country for the 2025 class. He reclassified, and he hit 2 home runs today in the same inning, and both of them were absolute moonshots. One of them was 450 feet. He had a rough start to the series, but he looked dialed in today, and he's a two-way player. We did not see him pitch so far this weekend. He has that ability, though. He's really here this year, though, dialing and hit. And he looked like he could definitely do that on Sunday, which was nice. Carson Bowen bounced back in a big way. He had a rough year last year, but had an inside-the-park home run on Friday. Hit the ball well. Maybe should have been caught, but the center fielder dove and missed it, and he took advantage. Also had a triple today and just had some good ABs. Like looked like he knew what he was doing. Starting pitching-wise, I thought they were pretty solid. Trevor Baumler, true freshman, threw 5 innings today, only gave up 2 runs, looked really comfortable, was very efficient, threw 67 pitches. Tommy Lepore on Saturday was fantastic. He had a great defensive play. First and third, 1 out. San Diego tries to bunt. He charged it, flipped it with his glove to the catcher who tagged out the runner. Got him out of a couple jams. He got out of a couple jams. Throws heat, like can get in the mid-90s. Had a lot of swing and miss stuff going. And then Cademan Parker on Friday, sort of a mixed bag, but you could see when he was on, you saw the ability there for him to be a top-of-the-line Friday night starter, which was nice to see. A couple of things that I didn't like. Again, not trying to make a lot of proclamations right now. I hope Anthony Silva can figure this thing out, but didn't look super comfortable at the plate so far, and had some good defensive plays. Had a crazy play, runner on second, 2 outs, slow chopper to short, and he gloved it, acted like he was going to throw out the runner at first, caught the runner that was at second rounding third, and ran over and tagged him out. Also had a backhand play in the hole where he gloved it and then threw it across the diamond for the out. And he makes things like that happen. Booted a few balls too. I mean, he's an incredible talent. Like, I think eventually he's going to get this going again. It's just early in the, through the first few games of the season, doesn't look quite right. And then finally, I saw Jamie Plunkett say that from Horned Frog Blitz, they had 6 errors so far this weekend. And a couple other plays that weren't officially ruled errors, but I think they were ultimately on the defense. So, got to clean that up. Can't give people extra outs, can't give people extra opportunities. But, man, overall, can't really ask for a better start to the year than being 3-0 against a San Diego team that won 40-plus games last year. We'll be back tomorrow. Thank you for joining us today. It's Locked on Horned Frogs, your team every day. Subscribe to our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts.